Greetings and salutations, Afrolytes. It is I, AfroMandias, back with another video today, and I just want to say that I'm really excited because honestly, we're about to go into our break and we're finishing up with the school year. It's been tough, it's been a long road, but you know what? I'm making it through, right? So, just want to say thank you all to those who've been watching and for those who haven't been commenting but kind of spectating on the side. I know you're watching. Just, don't be afraid. I'm not here to bite. I'm not here to scare you or anything. Just kind of if you have any questions, if you have any comments, just kind of leave it down in the bottom below. It's going to be a short intro today because obviously you know the rules, so do I. So let's just get into it today, right? So today, let's just talk about, another character that I've been making. A character who is a champion that I've created. I know, creating a champion. Hold your pitchforks and hold your tomatoes. I know that I've been working on this series a lot more than I have been building a bastard, but just kind of stick with me right quick, okay? We're still in the Great War Saga, and we're still kind of going over the heroes that are going to be a lot more important later on. Not to say that Cinderella Man's not important, but, he is technically the first ever villainous antagonist I have, so far until much later on. Just to say that we're just kind of getting through the heroes right now, so just kind of stick with me. I swear there'll be a lot more baddies that you guys can look out for, right? So, with all that being said, intro aside, let's talk about, instead of the first world president, let's talk about his first lady. That's right, the first lady of the world, Himawari-Ito, also known as Rose Flowers. Now, the thing about Rose Flowers is that she is actually kind of a package deal when it comes to this video because, not necessarily to say that I'm going to be talking about her brother, but, she obviously has a more of a connection to her brother as compared to Osiris and Anubis. While Anubis and Osiris were kind of like opposites of each other, they weren't as close. Osiris was more of a mommy's boy, while, Anubis was more of like your daddy's son, right? And whatnot. So obviously they didn't really see eye to eye, but Himawari and Janito were a lot closer because of the death of their mother, Karine. So Karine and Raijin obviously were the royal, were the emperor and empress of the Juri people, and obviously I'm gonna talk about what they look like later on. I'd mentioned that they're just basically space cat people, but there's a lot more to it than that, than just, that is more, there's more than what meets the eye, but let's kind of go over like the background first, right? So Karine and Raijin are the emperor and empress of the Raijin people. They've ruled it for a long time, and they basically, have a high standard when it comes to that sort of thing. They believe in, combat and only defending oneself and defending one's honor, death before dishonor, typical samurai stuff, right? Obviously, I kind of took inspiration from how the Predator also works. So think of the Jury Rays as more or less a mixture between how the Yautjas work and how Batman's moral code works, right? So they're samurai, they fight, and whatnot, but they fight to protect each other and for protection of oneself. But they don't fight anyone that they don't deem as worthy of fighting. So that's where the Yautja kind of comes into play. That that's one of their cooler aspects, is that they don't fight individuals who they don't consider a threat and whatnot, and they don't necessarily kill unless they have to. And obviously, I just said Batman, and Batman's known to not kill, but they try their best to at least incapacitate their enemies to a point where they can't fight anymore. So let's just say that. Anywho, that's just the Jury Ray people. So, they rule it for a little bit. And then Karine, tragedy strikes. Woo, I know. Toot your horns, send a check in the mail. But she goes down with a sickness. This sickness, unfortunately, is, it seems incurable because Raijin gets his best scientists and gets his best alchemists to try to see what they can do to try to heal Karine, but it only seems to make it worse, or it doesn't seem to do anything at all. And I'm about to drop some lore on you guys, okay? So one day, the clouds turn crimson red, and this story should sound familiar because I kind of mentioned this in my first video. Watch that if you want to get some more information. But essentially, the clouds grow a crimson red, and there's bloody red thunderstorms, lightning bolts shooting across the sky, piercing the heavens. And then what comes out of it? Two cadavers, two skeletons. It seems like they're entangled in one. They fall to the ground, and it almost seems like they're in a crystalline structure. That's interesting. I wonder, you had mentioned something, Afro. You had mentioned something about crystalline bodies and bloody red lightning bolts. I wonder what this is about. It can't be about stars, right? I know. Ooh, spooky, scary. Yes. In the story, Jin and Himawari are actually intertwined with the stars a little bit. So basically, this is kind of before Jin was even born, so Himawari wasn't even a thought. But this is, it's gonna come into play later. But basically, I'm gonna save this part for Raijin, but let's just say that one of the cadavers is used to heal Karin, and she gives birth to Raijin. So Raijin's out, he's okay for the most part. we'll get to him when we get to him in his video, but she befalls with this sickness again, and obviously, with Raijin using his expertise and knowledge, he realizes, oh, let's just use that, let's just use that cadaver that we found, but so the cadavers were both of a male and a female, so it seemed like they were brother and sister. They don't know anything about it. They just saw it as crystalline skeletons that just healed his wife, but they're going to come into play much later on. So just keep that in the back of your mind. It seemed like they were brother and sister, yada, 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 subtle foreshadowing. But he uses the female cadaver to essentially make an ailment to heal his wife again. Unfortunately, the second time she isn't so lucky. When she gives birth to Himawari, it seemed like she also sealed the same way she tried to seal the star in Jin. She tried to seal the star inside of Himawari, but thus it kills her. So in this process, unfortunately, Karin dies. It's sad, very somber, but life goes on, and obviously Raijin's kind of guilty, feels guilty about this, because it was either, let his unborn daughter and his wife die, or let his daughter live but have this curse of her not knowing that she basically caused the death of her mother. So, obviously there's something there to, add a little pain in the family, but, what makes a good character if they can't experience pain, right? So a couple of years pass, and obviously, Jin is very distant with his kids. Not to say that he doesn't love them or anything. He sees them as his own failure, that he couldn't keep his wife. And obviously, you can't have a complete family unless you have a motherly figure or a fatherly figure. Not to say that, for any gay couples out there, obviously, you guys do what you do, but, obviously there has to be a protector and a nurturer is what I'm trying to say. Obviously, most of the roles are filled with males being the protector and females being the nurturer. That is all I'm saying. Don't take this out of context. Just, this is how the story rolls with me, okay? So, obviously, they kind of grow up in this society where both of them are held in high praise, especially Jin, because, with him being the son of Raijin, he is held in higher regard, so he gets the best training, gets the best food. Raijin obviously rises above the ranks. Obviously, it's not through nepotism or anything, right? But he's a very skilled combatant and whatnot. But we're not going to talk about Raijin. This video is talking about Himawari. Himawari, what does she do? She is basically the princess, and obviously she is valued highly in the jury race society. So she is obviously protected and make sure that she's looked over, that she doesn't get hurt or anything, right? So, with her being the princess, all she has to do is just kind of sit there and look pretty until she has to get married and, pass down the lineage and whatnot, right? One problem. She doesn't really like to do that. She thinks that's kind of she thinks that's kind of boring. But you know what she really likes to do? She likes to fight. she likes to throw hands and likes to throw down. So that's kind of the nice little subversion. I know a lot of people are going to hate that word, but at least when I'm using it, I'm actually using it in a positive context. Is that she, while being in more of a diplomatic position, she is more of a fighter. She's willing to fight to protect her self, obviously, but also willing to fight to protect her people and whatnot. But she is obviously in a high position that she can't just put herself out on the battlefield, because she's basically a walking target, right? So it's like aim for the queen, you better not miss, or aim for the king, whatnot. So obviously she can't just go out on the battlefield and fight, right? So, but she kind of works around it because her grandfather actually teaches her. That's right. Not her father's father, but her mother's father. Her mother's father was also one of the generals that Raijin knew, and in fact, I think obviously, Raijin knew, Kareen's father, and because they were students at one point, he was his student and whatnot. So, yada yada yada. But that's kind of the idea of where he saw that she really wanted to fight and she wanted to learn how to fight. So he kind of took her back and kind of kept a little secret, teaching her how to fight and teaching her different moves and whatnot, to at least allow her to protect herself whenever the time came where she was alone and whatnot, right? So that's kind of her whole, backstory of what I have so far. Obviously, later on down the line, she does realize that she caused the death of her mother, and that fills her with a lot of guilt and fills her with a lot of sadness and anger towards her father, because she felt that she should have at least known that she caused it and whatnot. So, obviously there's sadness in the family and whatnot. But there's also going to be even more down the line, because the Great War Saga happens. Oh no. The Great War Saga. Great. But, with all that being said, obviously you guys know about the Great War Saga. It's the war between the Jury Rays and the Xerxians, and them obviously getting allies to fight on their side and whatnot. The Jury Rays got the Elementals, and the Xerxians got the Jurians. So, you guys following me? Good. Perfect. All right. So, at this point in the story, it's just basically the war between those two, but she falls in love with one of the Xerxian princes, and it's not Anubis. Ooh. Uh-oh. It sucks. It's one of those things where it's just, kind of a Romeo Juliet kind of thing going on. But, obviously the reason, you guys might be wondering, why does she fall in love with this Xerxian prince and whatnot? Well, one, because she admires, she admires how, the Xerxian culture is that they, view fighting as a way to dominate and whatnot, right? So she obviously sees that and is like, all right, I'm kind of game with that. That's pretty cool. Obviously, I can't really say that out loud because I'm around my people, but she understands, like, they like fighting, she likes fighting, so there's already like a common basis right there. But when it comes to Jack, anyway, she saw that he wasn't using his power, or the reason that he fought was to establish dominance, but instead it was to protect. So obviously, as I mentioned in my last video, Jack was more of a sentimental kind of prince, where he saw the good in everyone and was willing to at least show power in a way that was more merciful. The phrase, be strong enough to be gentle. And that's what kind of encompasses Jack, and that's what Rose, or Himawari, saw in Jack or Osiris, right? So that's kind of one of the reasons why she fell in love with him. And obviously, with everything else that was going on and the craziness, she never really got to know any Jury Rays other than her brother, because she was so like secured that like no other like Jury Ray was able to kind of like be around her unless there were like guards looking at her and whatnot, right? But when it came down to like council meetings and whatnot, when she was able to go with her father met with Set, who was Osiris and Anubis, his father, she was able to speak with Jack and Osiris, right? So obviously that's kind of where the connection began. Then the Great War happened, and then everything just kind of went straight hell right there, right? HE double hockey stick, So, and obviously that kind of caused tension between her brother and her father, and her love for Jack. And it's like, no, Daddy, I love him. He means so much to me. And her father is like, go to your room. And it's melodramatic and whatnot, right? So, you know the rules, so do I. The Great War Saga ends with everyone's family and race dying. Tragedy. It's terrible. It's sad. And obviously in this story, I didn't mention this in my Jack video, but I kind of wanted to add this in my Himawari video, and also want to add this other thing, that kind of established a relationship between Alva and Rose. But in this story, unfortunately, when Cinderella Man breaks out, in the causing destruction that he, inflicts on the cities of Xerxia, he kills Osiris's mother. And this obviously this leaves Osiris in a distraught manner. This breaks him down. He obviously is guilty because he feels like he wasn't strong enough to protect his mother. And obviously with his father and his brother being like, you should have been the one to protect her and whatnot. So they're coping by essentially taking out their anger on him, and he's kind of coping with just kind of being the punching bag and whatnot. And Rose is there to comfort him and let him know that everything is going to be okay, and that she also kind of feels kinship there, because she feels like when she realizes that she caused the death of her mother, it kind of solidified that kind of bond between them. It's very tragic in a way because it's bond through trauma, but at the same time, if you know someone who kind of went through the same feelings that you did, you kind of want to, if you're able to cope and go past it, then you're more willing to help someone who is going through that similar pain, right? So with her and Jack kind of going through that experience together, that allowed them to not only grow their relationship, but officially seal their love for one another, because those two experience similar pains, but also experience life in a way that everything is precious, and that whether it's enemies or friends, they believe that everything deserves another chance instead of ruthlessly taking it away from them, right? So that kind of solidifies, Jack and Rose's bond and their love for each other. Obviously, there's a couple more instances where they're, kind of all cutesy-wootsy and whatnot, still writing that out. But let's talk about her relationship with Alva. And I mean relationship as in friendship and whatnot, right? So obviously, Alva's going to have her own separate video. But, with her being the war queen of the Jurians, let's just say that she doesn't really hold jury rays in a higher regard. So when it all comes down to it, she views, especially how she views Himawari, she sees her as a very spoiled, very, like itsy bitsy, no good having like princess who doesn't know the struggles of fighting and in war and whatnot. But when it comes to Himawari, she respects Alva, because she sees her as, obviously in a way, she kind of sees herself in that, kind of sense where, Alva has this outward appearance of this super hardened warrior princess, but on the inside, she's more loving and caring and whatnot. Obviously, she doesn't really show that in the Great War Saga now, but when it comes, later on when they go back to Earth and they kind of, establish the immortals and whatnot, their friendship grows. But how their friendship kind of begins is that, Alva in the story is very much a egotistical, arrogant, warrior princess who believes that she's all that in a bag of chips. But then, obviously with Cinderella Man being the strongest character at this point, kind of puts her in her place, and by that he basically knocks some of her teeth out. In Jorian culture, obviously I should be saving this for Alva's video, but I'm just kind of establishing the context that sets up their friendship between Alva and Himawari. So basically she gets some of her teeth knocked out, and in Jorian culture, teeth is seen as like, this I don't know what you would call it, but it's kind of like how manes on lions is seen like in like lion prides and whatnot. If you have more of a luxurious mane, more mates will be attracted to you and whatnot. So the amount of teeth you have, how they're arranged, and how sharp they are is very integral to how, you're viewed in Jorian society. And obviously, with her being the daughter of King Adam, she was born with the best genetics. And with her having the royal blood inside of her, obviously, she was basically made the perfect Jorian female, right? So, with her getting her, teeth knocked out, kind of put her in a very depressed and sad state. Not only did she realize that she wasn't really all that she was cracked up to be, but she basically lost the only thing that kind of symbolized her status and her worth, or at least viewed somewhat of her worth as a Jorian. So with her saddened by this, she kind of locks herself away. But other than, David, who's a little bit worried about her, but, I was very, and that's kind of another thing that I wanted to bring up, is that this one scene was very interesting because I was tied on whether giving it to David or to, Himawari or Rose. So I kind of thought about it to myself, but then I realized that David and Alva are going to have more time to spend together when they have their own story when it comes to Bad Company. So I realized that this is a good starting point to Alva and Himawari's relationship. That's why I kind of gave the scene to her to kind of essentially build a foundation, right? So, Himawari essentially kind of comes and comforts her in a way that she tries her best to be more of like a big sister kind of thing going on. Alva obviously is very, aggressive and very hesitant at first, but she realizes that, Himawari doesn't, see her as an opponent at this point, but instead sees her as an ally. Because at this point, when Cinderella, a man, makes his, makes his entrance into the war, everyone's kind of like, okay, there's a bigger threat here, so let's just kind of put differences aside and take this guy down. So obviously, Himawari trying to be more diplomatic and just kind of, let Alva know that she is more than what she thinks she is, and that teeth are nothing, and that, obviously we lose things, but we gain more later on. So, in a sense, Himawari actually instructs some, I guess you could say like surgeons and whatnot, some of her best doctors to essentially fix up Alva's face and her teeth. And this is like everyone's in shock. Everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing? This goes against everything that's happening in the war. You can't be helping out the enemy." And she's like, "She is not my enemy. She is, she is an ally until this Cinderella Man business is dealt with. So we need as much help as we can. That is why I'm providing her with aid and whatnot, right?" So she sees this, Alva sees this, and kind of forms a bit of a respect for her. So that's kind of like, obviously there's going to be a little more expanded upon in Alva's video, but that's kind of the context where it builds on Alva and, Himawari's relationship, where they're basically, friends, and it all comes down to a point where they become, the godparents of each other's kids, right? So not to say that David and Jack aren't friends, but it's, obviously later on, I have mentioned in David's video that he grows a newfound respect for Jack and Rose and Isaac for basically giving him the rights and whatnot, and thus obviously forming the Immortals, blah blah blah. I have mentioned this in my Jack and David video. Watch those. But that's kind of the basis right there for how their relationship is. So, obviously the Great War happens, it ends, tragedy strikes, everyone goes off and does their own different things. And I had mentioned this in my Jack video, but, I had mentioned the reason why Jack got his name. Let's talk about how Rose got her name. I mentioned it in my last video, but I'm just kind of emphasizing this here, is that when she was in the battlefield, she had noticed that there was this bright red flower out in the middle of destruction, fire, and it was just, bodies laying about, but she had saw this red flower that was just sitting up throughout all the destruction. And she had asked one of the soldiers, what that flower was. And that soldier had replied he wasn't exactly sure, but it looked similar to a rose. And she realized, Rose, I love that name. And so that's kind of how she adopted the name Rose Flowers. And honestly, it kind of works in the whole familial tie, because you have Jack Flowers, you have Rose Flowers, and then later on they have Daisy Flowers. You kind of see where I'm Daisy, Rose, Flower. You guys get what I'm saying. But that's kind of where they go, back to Earth and whatnot, and they obviously help out the jailbirds, and they formed Jack, Himawari, and Isaac formed the United Undercover. They help out the jailbirds. You heard the story. I mentioned this in my Jack video. They formed the Immortals and whatnot. So that's kind of where I have Himawari's story. For the most part, again, these aren't going to be long segmented videos, but these are just kind of the basic gist of what these characters are going to be. Obviously, some things are going to change, others are going to remain the same, but honestly, I like the ground basis of what I have Himawari, or Rose Flowers. So, what is she based off of? Where does she come from? Where did she go? Where did she come from, Kanai Joe? So, Rose is a very interesting, thought development, because honestly, I could just point back to Jack and being like, Jack kind of snowballed this effect when it came to the other creatures in the Great War Saga. So, when I thought about Jack, and I had mentioned this in my first video, but I basically thought to myself, I used to have this cat. He was a very fun cat. He was a good cat. At my job, excuse me, his name was Ace. Unfortunately, we don't know where he is, but I like the look of how cats are. They're very elegant. They have a weird scent of aura about them. So I just decided, why not go with that? And honestly, with the pointy ears, it kind of adds more of a character to them, because you can show emotion not only through their face and whatnot, but also through their ears. So when they're down, they're more submissive and more quiet to themselves. When they're perked up, they're more excited, or they're on edge or whatnot. So the ears kind of add character to them and whatnot, right? And the tails kind of work as an extra limb or whatnot, right? So it can wrap around, it can grab things and whatnot. It's very prehensile. That's the word I'm looking for. It's very prehensile. So that's kind of the idea where I went with it. It's just basically giant alien, space samurai cats and whatnot. So, but another question is that since she is of the royal, guard, and she's not really known to fight, how come she has a whip? Why a whip of all weapons? And it's, that's a very good question. And one, obviously, the Jury Rays have a tattoo on their arm. If you've noticed from my post and whatnot, you probably haven't, because I'm still kind of posting things, but basically they have this tattoo where it's rings, that go down their forearm, and ends on a band. Those rings are embedded with a magic insignia that allows him to summon a weapon, right? So, for Jin, obviously he summons his sword, which is more of a concentrated leader of a weapon that, shows sign of great power and whatnot. But for Rose, hers is a whip, which is more of a range, more of a, necessarily more of a ranged weapon that kind of keeps herself at a distance from her enemies. So it's kind of symbolic, but I'm still kind of thinking of a reason why I chose a whip. Obviously, dominatrix vibes and whatnot, whipping and whatnot. But, there is more to it than what meets the eye. I'm still kind of writing that out, though. But basically, her, grandfather kind of granted her that insignia onto her arms to allow her to use that weapon. And that's kind of her main weapon of choice, is the whip. So, that's kind of the basic design and aspect and whatnot. So let's, speaking of which, let's talk about her powers and abilities. Obviously the super category, right? Super strength, super speed, super durability, super intelligence, very high battle IQ. With her being a warrior, with her being a princess and learning battle tactics from her grandfather. Also, kind of, seeing how her brother fights and her father fights, she kind of mimics that as well. So she's very, very high battle IQ. She also has the ability to summon plasma kunai that allow to, obviously explode on impact or kind of sit there, and she summons it to explode. So she summons different types of kunai and whatnot, and she has different types of like spells that allow her to teleport or to turn invisible. So and she also can fly. She also can use her whip as like an extra limb or like a more of a ranged weapon, or she can like tighten her whip like she can circle it around to a point where it forms a shield. So that's kind of her basic gist of her powers and abilities. Later on in the story, she actually gains a second form because of the star that's she has encompassed inside of her. I'm gonna save that. Honestly, I'm probably gonna mention this a lot more in my Jin video because it'll be a lot more important. But basically, she can tap into the second form that allows her to be granted the power of a star. So, just gonna leave that there. But it's gonna be more expanded upon in Janito's video. But with all that being said, what role does she serve? So obviously, she is more of a she's a good character. She doesn't really like to hurt people. But she tends to be more. She's basically like she's very curious, right? She obviously curiosity killed the cat. That's kind of where the idea comes from, right? So when it all comes down to it is that when she gets into politics and whatnot, she kind of leaves that to Jack and whatnot. Not to say that she doesn't get involved at all, but she kind of leaves that to Jack, and Jack is more diplomatic than she is because she doesn't really like being diplomatic. She wants to be more of a fighter and wants to be more out there, right? She doesn't want to take the back seat. So it comes down to her basically going out on midnight strolls around the planet, kind of looking around to see if there's any crimes. So she would just kind of see a bank robbery and she would just be excited because she's able to, not necessarily hurt the criminals, but basically just kind of stretch out her muscles and, kind of get the blood pumping and whatnot, right? So that's kind of the role that she plays. She's not like, when she fights, she doesn't fight with ill intent. She just she likes to fight. She likes the thrill of it. She likes the adrenaline of it and whatnot. She meets a few characters that, want to study under her and whatnot, and she teaches them and stuff like that. So, that's kind of the role she plays. And obviously, with her being the wife of Jack Flowers, she is his right hand woman. She's there for him. She's there to support him physically and emotionally. She loves him and she cares about him very, very much. Very loyal to him, and sees that sees that he is making a better future for the world that they're living on. Although they couldn't save the world that they couldn't save their world, they can save this world, and she sees that he's doing good. And so, at least she can pass on knowing that there is a brighter future for her children and her children's children, or they're Jack and Rose's children, right? So, what does this character mean to me? And, this character is very interesting because, you know, I really like this character. This character, is very unique in a sense that she has a role of being a, diplomatic princess, but she doesn't really want to be that. She wants to be a go-getter. And obviously, I say this, but she's not really a. I like her because she's not really a unique character, but she's a character that, a lot of people can look to and say, yeah, she's pretty cool. She's a fighter, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's a protector of, planet Earth. She's all goodies wrapped up into one, and she fights for the greater good, and she fights because she likes it. And I just like how simple that is, but honestly, with the role that she's serving and whatnot, I feel like it kind of takes her character further because she's now put into a position where she has to fight, but it's not in a way that she imagined fighting. She thought of it being more of like a fun sport and whatnot, but in the context of the Great War, she fights to survive, and she fights to protect her friends, and she fights to protect her allies. So she realizes that there's more to fighting than just winning or losing, but there's fighting to protect your ones you care about and protecting yourself. So that's kind of the idea that I have for her, and she is just a very unique concept because she is also embedded with a star, and that also adds in her conflict with her because it seems like she wants to go all out, but she can't because she realizes that if she loses control, she fears that she won't be able to have that control back. So let's kind of go back to one of my favorite characters of all time up until this point a couple of years ago was Superman. One of my favorite quotes from him, and it's from the Justice League animated series, was "a world made of cardboard." And honestly, that sentence alone is frightening, especially coming from an individual like Superman. Now, obviously, he was talking to Darkseid, and they were on a planet where there were no casualties to be worried about, so Superman just let him have it. So, in a sense that, later on in the story, Rose kind of has that same sentiment with with a star. Obviously, I'm not going to name names, but the Immortals do fight stars in one of their stories. So, she comes to that sentiment, and Alva, sees in one of the fights that she's fighting Cinderella Man, she sees just how powerful Himawari, just how powerful she is, and that there's just this aura that surrounds her that's full of not only anger but darkness, but she uses it to protect others, and she realizes that she has to calculate that amount of power she can use before she loses control of it. So that's also another reason why Alva kind of respects Rose and whatnot, and that's kind of the idea that what Rose says towards the star is a world made of glass. Obviously it's kind of the same thing of cardboard and whatnot, but in a sense it's also kind of poetic because when you break glass, that shards of glass can also cut you. So at the same time, while you damage the glass damages you. Ooh, you know what I'm saying? But that's kind of the idea that I have for her, and this character has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to ride around in this story. So again, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter video today, but basically, that's kind of my gist of who Himawari is. And again, just want to say that I'm really excited with how this channel has been growing. I've seen the views, I've seen it increase, kind of wishing a couple of videos are kind of getting a little more views, but all in due time. I know a lot more people is still kind of busy right now, so obviously if you are one of those viewers, kind of just send it in a work group chat, be like, hey, check out this guy with an afro, he's talking about some nonsense, if you guys are interested, but just want to say, I'm really excited with how these things are going, and I just want to shout out to my #1 fan, Dad. I know you're watching. I just wanted to say Thank you for all the support, and I'm really excited with where this is going, and just want to say that I love all my viewers. I know you guys aren't commenting anything, but we're getting there. I know you Afrolytes are out there, but don't be afraid. Leave a comment, subscribe, do whatever you got to do, and we're gonna push through this together. But with all that being said, I am AfroMandias. Stay fresh and stay frosty, Afrolytes. I'll see y'all next time.